Welcome to Justice Losers, the podcast where we discuss entertainment media, namely movies, TVs, and comics. I'm your host, Preston, joined as always by my delightful co-host,
Plant Matt.
Oh.
Decided on that 3 seconds ago. We're going with it.
Matt, what should people do?
People should like, subscribe, and check out our Instagram highlights.
Matt.
Preston.
That's your episode.
Preston.
Matt.
Give me a myth. Give me a myth.
A myth?
Any myth. Can you think of a myth? Nice little mythical story.
Some child coming out of Zeus's calf. And then also Seafoam made Persephone, I think. What's a myth and what's a legend?
I think that they are separate, but I think it's difficult to disentangle.
In my mind, a myth is a thing that is used to explain the existence of something. Yeah. And a legend is a story that is told that is believed to be more or less superficially true.
Yeah, I'd take it as in a similar vein. I'd take a legend as a story that's based in fact, but has acquired mythic quality over time.
Yeah, I like that.
Myths are a little more ambiguous. It is something that a legend can eventually morph into a myth, but myths function a lot of different ways, right? I mean, you pointed out the myth as explanatory vehicle for the way the world works. Yep. So, I don't know, the one that jumped to mind for me was Pandora's box. Why is there bad stuff in the world? Because
some idiot opened a box that had the bad stuff.
Pandora was really curious and opened this box and all the bad stuff came out.
Yep.
But also hope, so it's all okay. And there's lots of different myths. There are sort of all these classical myths. Greek mythology has a huge role in just our modern understanding of mythology and the way we think about things. And I read Percy Jackson too, so I'm very prepared for this. Boy. And then there's myths that are in the sense of like almost cultural memes that persist today. A good one that I found just searching for common modern myths is the Marie Antoinette lit the meat cake. There's lots of different kinds of myths, and there's myths that explain natural phenomena and myths that explain human nature phenomena. And in a lot of these myths, not all of them necessarily, but in a lot of these myths, there are heroic mythic characters.
Right.
Theseus, Hercules. Give me some more.
Perseus.
Good lad. Yes.
Achilles.
Give me some that aren't Greek.
So Gilgamesh.
Yay, there's one we've talked about. Yeah, Mesopotamian, Gilgamesh. His
Mulan. The actual Mulan. This is something you didn't mention, but like the actual Mulan, there's a ballad about her.
Yeah.
So now that we've kind of had this little preamble, I want to explain again what these next 4 episodes are going to be.
Okay, let's do it.
So we're going to do a series, these next 4 episodes, on the development of and into the current idea of a superhero and supervillain. This episode is going to be focusing on heroes in antiquity. This is things that we've mentioned: mythical heroes, legendary heroes. And then the next episode, we are going to talk about, I think, more proper legendary. Because in my mind, the distinction between this episode and the next episode is fact versus mythological. So you mentioned that legendary is kind of like stories, but with a mythic quality. The elements of a true story that are mythic make it legendary. With Arthur, the Excalibur, like the magicalness of Excalibur is mythical for an ultimately kind of real story, so that makes it legendary. Okay. Merlin was mythical because magic doesn't exist. But I think that kind of gets into my definition of a hero and what I'm going to use as the definition of a hero.
Okay, this is probably something we should lay out if we're going to talk about heroes for 4 episodes straight.
So the definition of a hero to me is a character with either somewhat superhuman abilities, or crazy advanced skills.
Yeah, I think for me a hero is sort of an icon within a mythological story, sort of a figure that I guess represents particular themes, say, or particular elements of human nature, or is supposed to be some sort of symbol almost. There's a lot of I mean, if we take one explanation of myth as something that people use to explain things or to help shape society, you can take heroes as like sort of the idol that you try to aspire to be.
Yeah. So we have to distinguish here that when we say hero for the rest of these 4 episodes, we're not talking about like the protagonist of the story. We're talking about,
right.
I mean, it's likely the protagonist of the story, but a hero is, by those definitions, somewhat aided by supernatural abilities or supreme skill.
Yeah.
So you made a really interesting point that I like a lot, is that like the heroes in antiquity kind of represent humanity, like human qualities. I think both flaws and aspirations. Yeah. And so stuff like the Odyssey with Odysseus, like he made mistakes.
Yeah.
And like that's the thing that like at least for him, like Odysseus, I know there was a lot of mistakes he made. Like his
whole deal is making mistakes, basically.
Right. And I think that's something that resonates with people. What like is that it's not an unreachable thing. It's like you make mistakes, but then sure you can go ahead and kill a Cyclops.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you look at even like the Greek gods and Titans, and these are not sort of absolute divine beings. They're basically just big humans with superpowers.
Yeah. I think the idea is that the same messages made it through.
Yeah.
So like Hercules always did a stupid thing and had to do things to make up for it.
Yeah, no, I was reading an interesting thing that scholars speculate that Grecian tragedies, the audience would show up and they would basically know what the story was going to be. They know that Oedipus had a whole Oedipus thing going on. So they know basically how the story is going to go, but they change the trappings and they change bits and pieces and try to come up with different approaches to it. Yeah,
it's fluid and the stories change a little bit, but the message ultimately stays the same. The feeling that you get as a consumer.
And I was thinking about it while you were talking. We know how Man of Steel was going to end before it ended. We know he's going to stop the big blue sky beam and save the world and get the girl.
Right. Was there a big blue sky? There was a big blue sky beam. Yeah.
There's always a big blue sky beam. Yeah. So we know the contours of the myths, and this is kind of getting ahead of this episode in particular.
Right.
But back then, they knew the contours of the myth. They just got to see the little bits and different pieces.
Yeah. So why are these the stories that really stuck through? Why was there no creativity in coming up with new stories with new heroes? Why was it always like, hey, we're going to tell the story of Percy Jackson?
Because of the humanity thing.
Right.
It's the simultaneous, you can see yourself in them because they're the
And I guess
flaws.
you know that you would be able to see yourself in them. You're not going to be like, oh, like I don't want to watch the movie or watch someone do a play of like John Bonaventure. That's a real person. I don't know why that name came into my head.
What?
But I don't want to watch the story of this new guy that I don't know because I don't know if I'll be able to connect with him. But I know that I feel the story of like I've made a mistake and I'm willing to do like 12 chores to to fix it.
No, it's just it's human nature to go to the old and the familiar, and I think it also these are just heroes or something that are going to be very appealing. We know we're a species that likes having leaders, that likes having people to look up to. It plays the role of religion in their lives. It's that almost the spirituality, the sense of like, this is the way things are, this is the way the universe operates. Maybe you don't believe in a literal sense that every time lightning strikes, it's Thor smiting another troll.
Yeah.
But you have some sense of the way the universe operates and what the moral lessons of these heroes are, and what you should aspire to be and what flaws you should try to avoid and better yourself to avoid.
Yeah.
And the myths and the heroes are just ways to boil that down into an easily transmissible story.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's where you get into the sort of the breakdown between myth and theology, which is something interesting I stumbled on. Like, we would call, say, Hindu stories myths in just normal Western culture, but we'd call Judeo-Christian stories theology.
Ooh.
There's not an obvious defining line and the difference.
Well, I think
there.
I think the line is that what your culture is around. And so let's stick to Greek and Romans where they have those heroes. Like, you look back at those and they're like these myths and legends and stuff. And then if you were actually a Greek person, you're like, oh, these people existed and I can be like that. Like, to them, it was very real. To us, it's a story. So I think it's very different, like, for how we perceive it now to be a story than it was for them back when it was active. Right.
So then why do we care at all about old myths that are just stories?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, actually, I have two things. One is explain society back then. So, like, we can look at all these stories and kind of see the culture of what happens when you do this thing. Like, so, for example, Hercules beat his wife and kids and was punished for it. We can see in the society back then that it was not cool to beat your wife and kids. But now, like, for us now, it's like they still kind of apply. Like, punishment and redemption. Like, you want that as a person. You're like, I want to be redeemed for the stupid shit I did.
Well, the myths we still remember and the heroic figures we still remember are the ones that hit something true about human nature.
Right.
So Perseus was tasked with killing Medusa.
Right. I did not know that. Now I know that.
He's tasked with killing Medusa, and he's given some divine aid in doing so. Which leads me to the point that a lot of these guys, one of the heroic qualities is violence. A lot of these heroes are violent dudes, and specifically dudes who are violent.
Okay.
Is this because it's the evil patriarchy, or is it something else?
Well, so, like, the thing is that we know a lot about these because growing up in a patriarchy, they may not have been the only ones predominant there.
Okay.
So my example is that, like, we know about these because we tell the story of these heroic men. But, like, I mean, like, Norse was, to my knowledge, really not a patriarchy. Like, Freya was a powerful woman. Oh, yeah. Like, they had a lot of really powerful women who did a lot of really cool shit.
Yeah, Norse Pantheon's got a good mix.
Like, so us thinking of Thor and Odin is pretty much because we grew up in a patriarchy where the focus was on the male stuff.
Okay.
I don't think that it was intended for only men to be the heroes, but I think because of the way society is and our obsession with patriarchy now, the female heroes have kind of gone by the wayside.
Okay.
I could be incredibly wrong. I will probably get crucified for saying it because think of Mulan. She had to act like a man to do things.
Yeah. I think it's more to the fact that some of the obvious and simple heroic qualities are going to be about physical strength and violent leadership.
Well, yeah. Okay. So thinking of Norse, like, Thor is a brute guy who beats people with the hammers. Meanwhile, the enemy is the trickster one. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I think that's really more of a Western thing, because you look at Maui's a great example. Like, he's masculine dude, he hits people with his fishhook thing, but he's kind of the trickster guy in a lot of these mythologies, and yet he is sort of the big hero that everyone has heard about.
I think we've talked.
Yeah, we know what heroes are. Yeah. I guess I should probably Theseus-ize.
Theseus.
See what I did there?
Theseus. We never talked about Theseus.
He had a ship.
So Theseus-ize us.
Theseus-izing. Yeah, so pretty much every society has its mythology. It's a set of stories. Some of them are sort of bleeding into legends, dramatizing historical events, or taking reasonably true characters and blowing them out of proportion just because, I mean, that's what happens. One important element in a lot of these myths is the hero. And this is someone who is typically, they have some big noticeable attributes. They receive divine help or divine intervention against them. And they have some sort of quest, usually involving killing something or inflicting violence on something, because these are sort of often masculine icons.
I think an important element of these heroes that there is an end to their story.
Okay.
That their story is their story. Because that's something that's going to come up.
That's true.
A little bit later.
Yeah. There's sort of a figure that can pop up in different things, or you can tell different stories about them, but it's just like, this is the thing. They did the thing. The thing was done. And then they went on to have many heroic deeds that we don't have time to tell you about because it's time for bed, little kids.
Yep.
Something like that. Heroes exist. They endure because they remind us of our own flaws, but they give us something to aspire to. And because they are, at least the successful ones, the ones that have endured, are very elemental representations of particular elements of human nature. They tell stories that are true in not a literal sense, but a emotional sense, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Hey guys, Preston here. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you liked what you saw here, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we upload these every Thursday. If you want to hear more, we have an unabridged version on Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, and any other podcast app. Check us out on Instagram at JusticeLosersPod. See you next week.